Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 12 of my 2023 reads. This week I read some romances, some picture books, and DNF'd a book. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. First, I finished Hen Fever by Olivia Waite. This is a female-female Victorian romance novella that I was very intrigued by, especially because Olivia Waite wrote The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics, which I had quite enjoyed. And when I heard about this new novella that kind of centered around two women and also chickens, I thought, that sounds really interesting. So the basic premise of this is that we have two women, one who is kind of middle-aged, a little bit of a spinster, lives in the village and raises chickens, which she shows at a competition annually around Christmas time and is very competitive about. The other is a widow who moves with some other people who were kind of involved in the war to a manor house, and it turns out that there are some chickens wandering the grounds of that manor house who had escaped from captivity a decade before during a storm, but these are very prized chickens. And so they come into conflict as the village woman tries to come and take the chickens so that she can show them. And it turns sort of from this conflict into friendship and lovers. So I think that the premise of this with the whole chicken thing was really fun. I loved all the parts about the chicken, truthfully. But I think that the novella length of this made it kind of hard for me because we went from the characters not knowing each other to sort of enemies to friends to lovers very, very quickly. It was sort of like 5 chapters, and in each chapter there was one of these jumps. And that was a lot for me. Like, I didn't feel like we had the kind of exploration and depth to that emotional journey, if that makes sense. It just felt very jarring each time they would make that next step in their relationship. There was also kind of a lot of philosophizing in this book, so it felt a little heavy at times, a little heavy-handed, even though I agree with a lot of the ideas that it was talking about, but it felt like a lot to do in this little novella. So I think that while I did think the premise of this really was really cute, I would have wanted a much more fleshed out version of this, or I would have wanted something that made that the scope of the story a little smaller so that it could be fleshed out a little bit better in the kind of pages that it had. Overall, I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Take the Lead by Alexis Daria. I heard about this from Kazen at Always Doing, who I will link below. This is an updated, kind of revised version of Alexis Daria's first novel, and Kazen had said that the revision is really, really great and really worth picking up. So I picked it up, and I was so amused because right before I picked this up, I had, for the first time, sort of watched some clips from Strictly Come Dancing, which is this British movie stars pair up with dancers and compete in these dances, and I had been watching some clips of that, and then I started reading this, which is all about celebrities who compete in this dancing show. I'm sure other people have seen these shows before, I just hadn't, and it was just like a lot of fun. So the premise of this is that we have a guy who with his family are part of a reality TV show where they live in the wilderness in Alaska, although kind of a lot of it is fake. And he's not supposed to talk about how fake a lot of it is. But he's doing this because his family is, you know, kind of needs the money, and there's some money involved in competing in the dance show. His mom has just gone through surgery, these sorts of things. The heroine in this is a professional dancer, and she has a lot of career goals, and she's kind of been told that if she doesn't come into the finals in this season, that probably she's going to be let go from the show. So they're both pretty motivated to get far in the competition, but the hero just doesn't really know what to do, and is a little kind of jaded when it comes to reality TV, but they find themselves dancing together and also coming together as people and very attracted to each other, even though the heroine really doesn't want to get involved in anything because the show is also trying to push for a showmance to make it seem like they're involved to get a kind of viewership and things like that, and she doesn't want that. She doesn't want that to taint her sort of career, if that makes sense. So I think that all of the dancing dancing stuff in this was a ton of fun. I really liked the hero. He's the cinnamon roll guy, and I think that the steamy scenes were very steamy, and the plot was really interesting, the way that the show moved forward. I think that all of that was awesome. There was just, though, a bit more drama than I like, especially towards that kind of third act conflict area where I didn't always necessarily understand why there was so much conflict, especially on the heroine's part. Like, she's so against people knowing that they're involved because she feels like it'll tank her career, but I'm not really sure that that was fully justified. So yeah, it was just a little bit more dramatic than I like, but also the writing was really good. It was super engaging. I loved all the dancing stuff. The hero was excellent. So it was still a very, very good read, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read some picture books, starting with 2 by María José Ferrada, who is the author that wrote How to Turn Into a Bird and How to Order the Universe, that I read recently and loved. I have kind of a dual review for those, so I'll link below. I was looking for more books by her, and it turns out that she actually has kind of an extensive picture book catalog, even though she's only written the 2 novels. So I started borrowing some of her picture books. So the first is Niños, Poems for the Lost Children of Chile by María José Ferrada, illustrated by María Elena Valdez and translated from Spanish by Lawrence Schimel. So this is a really interesting picture book. It's clearly for, like, you know, children or middle grade audience, but it's kind of heavy in what it is. So basically there were 30-some children who were lost during the Pinochet regime. So they were killed by the regime, or they were disappeared by the regime. And so these poems are sort of memorial and elegy to these kids who were lost. They're actually really lovely and whimsical and gentle and sweet poems, focusing on, from kind of the perspective of the kids, what they may have like loved about nature and life. They're just like these beautiful poems. It's a little heartrending when you think about what they're about, but reading it is just very, very sweet, and I loved the illustration style as well. It's kind of this very ethereal feeling illustration. So I thought that this was just excellent. I loved each of the poems, I loved the illustrations, and I loved the idea of doing this kind of memorial to these lost children. Then the other picture book by her is Mexique, a refugee story from the Spanish Civil War by María José Ferrada, illustrated by Ana Penyas, and translated from Spanish by Elisa Amado. So this is similarly kind of a picture book that tackles a slightly heavier issue. This one is about a boat, the Mexique, which sailed from Spain to Mexico, and took all of these kids who were the children, like 450 kids, who were the children of people who were on the Republican side of the Spanish Civil War, so against the kind of dictatorship. And the parents were like, you know what, things are really tense here right now in Spain. Let's send our kids to Mexico for the summer until things kind of get wrapped up here with the Civil War, and thinking that they'd be able to then bring their kids back. Except that they weren't able to, because things kind of deteriorated with the Spanish Civil War, and then there was World War II. And so this is this kind of journey of these kids that is told in a really interesting way. So it's a young children's picture book, and it's just these kids making this journey and expecting that they're going on sort of a summer vacation in a sense. And the illustrations in this are fascinating because they are drawn on top of photos from actually that journey in that time. So yeah, it's just like such a fascinating history. And again, it's not heavy in terms of what it is. It's just the kids going on a boat journey and kind of, you know, saying goodbye to their parents for what they think it's going to be just a few months, but they're going to end up basically living out most of their lives in Mexico. So yeah, just again, a very political, historical picture book that I think is appropriate for kids, but also as an adult, when you know the history behind it, it's kind of a lot. So yeah, I thought this was also just so fantastic, and I gave this also 5 out of 5 stars. And then I read one more picture book, which was The Little Toymaker by Kat Min. This is such a beautiful picture book. It is fantastically illustrated with so many colors, and it's just so fanciful. I loved the illustration in this. Catman is just fantastic at these very whimsical, beautiful, colorful drawings. So this story is about a little boy who is a toy maker, and he makes toys, but he makes toys for older people, grandparents and the like. And he's very, very good at his job. But one day an old woman comes to him and he can't quite figure out how to make the right toy for her. So it's about him trying to figure out what it is that would be the right toy for her. And it's just a very sweet story about this kind of emotional connection and him learning how to understand her. Absolutely lovely story. Really, really highly recommend this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And then I did DNF one book, which was The Map of Salt and Stars by Zeyn Joukhadar. So this is a book that I have been trying to read for quite a while. I originally picked this up a couple of years ago. I'd started it and then I'd had to pause it because I needed to return it to the library, but I've been meaning to get back to it. So I picked it up again a couple of months ago and I have been slowly trying to work through it. And finally at 42%, I decided, you know what, I think I can't actually get through this. I think that what the story is doing is actually really, really cool, but it ended up just being too heavy for me. So this is sort of a kind of a dual timeline story that follows a girl in 2011 as she and her family move back to Syria after her father dies. They were in the US, and the little girl, who's maybe around 10 years old, basically grew up in the US, but they go to Syria. But that's right when the Syrian civil war kind of breaks out and things get bad, and they end up becoming refugees and having to make a journey around the Mediterranean as they're trying to find safety and find a place to kind of get just a place to be. And the other timeline that we're following is a story that her father used to tell her about a girl from the, I think, 13th century who was an apprentice map maker and traveled around the Mediterranean. And so we're kind of following both of their journeys, alternating as they go from place to place. I especially loved the historical one, just this, it's also a little bit fantastical. This journey of this map maker's apprentice and the places that they see and the history and all of this stuff is just really, really fantastic and wonderful. But the modern day storyline of what this refugee family is going through is intense. I mean, they're refugees, there's war, you expect it to be intense, but it's pretty intense. There's quite a lot of injury and bad things that happen to the family, and it was just, I just couldn't get myself to pick this book up because every time I did, I'd just be kind of really wiped out by the experience of reading about that. So definitely, this is a book that I could recommend to other people, but it's one that I just can't quite get through myself because I struggle with things that are a little bit graphic and violent in nature, and this was just a little bit too much for me, but it's still something that I think is a really solidly good book. Okay, so that is everything that I read and DNF this week. If you guys have read any of these, you're interested in any of them, you have any good recommendations for romance novels or picture books or anything like that, I'd love to hear from you. Just leave me a comment down below.